Alright, so if you saw my earlier video, I was muted. I'm a silly guy and I forgot to unmute my mic, but this time we're good. Today we're gonna take a look at the Omega Shenron stage, which just came out for the Shadow Dragons event on the TV version. I know that this will probably be helpful more so to global players that are like waiting for the event and trying to see, okay, how can I best prepare for this event? So today's video, we're going to go ahead and cover exactly what the stage does in terms of all the unique abilities. And then after we cover the general layout of the stage, we're going to move forward and talk about the actual stats in more detail. Specifically, this guy, I guess I'll spoil a little, he does do AoE attacks. So I want to talk about how much damage his normals actually would do, depending on the typing you are. And then we're going to take a look at him compared to some of the two other harder hitting bosses in the game, which we met a cooler core and then the Cell Maximin, right? So at least by pure numbers specifically. Let's hop right into it. We're gonna take a look at Omega, and then we'll also compare him to Sin too, right? Obviously, Sin before this, what many people did consider to be the hardest event in the game. So I think it'll be good to compare them, especially since a lot of people think that, you know, even I would agree, they are similar events in terms of structure, but there are some differences between them. Now, this first phase is against TEQ Omega Shenron. Now, he doesn't really hit that hard, but he has some gimmicks with him. For example, when he super attacks, he has either a 100% chance to stun you or a 100% chance to seal you. Now, I would say you would prefer to be sealed. I think that being sealed at the very least would allow you to attack in situations where, you know, units may need to attack to get some certain buildup or something like that. Whilst if you're sealed, you literally are just unable to do a single thing about that. So at least that's just my opinion. I don't know if it's like, you know, 50-50 chance to get either the stun or the seal, or if it's like, you know, 70% chance to for the stun super attack and 30% chance for the seal. I feel like usually it's been a nice blend. I think it is probably 50-50 just from my experiences, but I guess I don't know the actual math for sure. Now, this guy only has an 8% chance to super attack. He does attack 8 times per turn. Now that is, I feel like, a pretty low chance to super attack actually, but he does have 0 cooldown. So if you guys aren't aware of what a cooldown is, just to explain, a cooldown is the amount of attacks that a boss needs to do to super attack again. Now, although he can only super attack once per turn, what that means is that, yeah, even I've had this happen to me before, and when I was trying some runs, he could super you right at the end of a phase. Like, let's say you're on turn 1, he supers you right at the end. On turn 2, the very first attack could be a super attack again, because he has no cooldown. Cooldowns do actually carry over to the next rotation if they super attack at the end, but obviously this guy doesn't have one, so that doesn't actually count for him. Obviously, since it's only 8%, that's not really too likely to happen, but it's something that you could potentially see. I don't know, even though it's 8%, to me it just feels like this guy always super attacks in the first slot turn 1. He just really much a menace about it. Now, some extra things to talk about. This guy does have a 7% chance to dodge. He disables attack, evasion, right? It's only this first phase that disables dodge, but it can be a little worrisome for some of these units, especially, let's say, like, if you're trying to run Blue Kaioken Goku in here, let's say if you're trying to run, like, Age UI Goku and S UI Goku, it will be very, very difficult for them because they can't dodge in this first phase. And you're going to be in this first phase for some time, because he does reduce damage received by, it says an additional 40%. I don't know the exact number, because he doesn't actually reduce 105% damage against, obviously, any non-int types. Like, you still do damage to him. It feels more like a closer to like 80% reduction, probably 70 to 80%. But he does have this extra damage reduction, which makes him pretty tanky, and that will allow him to stall you out. And that does actually help make this fight into more of a longer fight. Compared to like Sin Shenron, this first phase is kind of weak. You can stall a little, but if you're like really trying, you melt this phase. Well, this phase, even if you're like, you know, running all the top best units in the game, Dragon Ball Z Duo, GT Duo, you know, stuff like that, you're gonna be kind of stalled out. So that's the thing about that. So that's all this guy's doing. Again, he's not hitting hard, but he has a lot of things to him. Now, one way you can work around what he's doing though is attack lowering. You can actually attack lower this first stage of Omega, right? So again, let's say the new full power Super Saiyan 4 Goku on GP. He does attack lore in his 12 key super attack. I don't know if you're running LR Golden Frieza. There's a bunch of other units that actually do have attack lore, like LR Orange Piccolo has one like that. Bulma or 12 key attack lures. There's actually a bunch of like units that do attack lore now, and then I like that they're like making it so that attack luring and stuff like that is like useful in these first few stages, because this guy can be attack lured, he can't be sealed or stunned obviously, but I think that's pretty good. Okay, and then next we get into this guy. This is where things start getting pretty difficult, right? So he's starting to do AoEs here. Yes, 2 AoEs within the turn. The AoEs can hit pretty solidly hard, right? 400k normal for the first one, and then 360k for the second one. He has a 50% attack raise on a super attack here, so that does make his normals hit considerably harder. A very, very much of an issue. 20% chance to do the super attack within the 9 attacks that he has that can be a super. And he also has a 0 cooldown, so again, it's going to be potentially more common with this guy, but he could super you right at the end of a phase, and then he could super you again right at the beginning of the phase, like back to back. It could be very, very nasty and leave you very little breathing room. So this guy could be very obviously disgusting about that. Now, the thing obviously is that this time he doesn't like seal or stun anymore. He doesn't have the extra damage reduction. So I feel like you can melt this phase a little quicker, especially if your units are really built up from this phase. But he hits really hard, really quickly, and his AoEs can be very devastating to units. He really kind of like hold these units really like apart, right? Because especially with the fact that, okay, I will go to Omega in a bit right now, but you want to run physical units for this guy, but then he counters that, and you're like, okay, I'll run AGO units, but then even this guy counters those AGO units, right? Very, very tough type coverage that they made with this fight, right? So it's like you're kind of punished by bringing type advantage units no matter what you do, right? So that's an interesting thing about him. So like if you're bringing these physical units and then they get hit with an AoE at the end, they're going to take a lot of damage. Again, we'll take a look at the specific damage the defenses they would need, right? But it's a lot there, and it's much different from this guy, because I feel like this guy just doesn't really, he hits similar damage numbers, but his like normal attacks are just not gonna hit as hard as what this guy's can be post super attack. He does more AoEs. He just feels like he does more damage. The type coverage really makes just things feel tougher. So that's the thing, comparing these two together. And then we have the final fight. This guy is just basically a harder version of the Sin, right? He hits harder. Again, hits harder in the AoE attacks right there. Hits harder in a super attack. Same cooldown, right? He's just a more tough version of this guy. And this guy is pretty strong, right? On his own, right? With the 480k normals plus the super attack, right? I guess, yeah, his super attack hits harder. Same 40% debuff. This guy's tough, right? For sure. And he has a lot more HP, right? You see 71 mil HP to 75. So that's, if you take a look at the total HP, so that's 4 million HP. That's extra. That's another 10 mil. So that's 14 million HP. That's extra. And then 33 minus 33. So that's, he gets an extra 14 million HP. And then I think the damage reduction, yeah, like 75% damage reduction, 68%, and then 65% plus the additional from the non-type. So this guy's damage reduction is a lot higher, which makes the fight last longer. You could say, okay, well, that lets me build my units faster, but that also leaves you to have technically, there's like 2 arguments for that. 1, it lets your units build up faster, but 2, you're in the event longer and you have more chances to get caught like by one of your potential weak units with a super attack, right? So it can be very annoying, right, in that situation. This guy also does have, again, a 20% chance of super, same as this Sin right here. Like, again, just comparing it, this guy has 20%, this guy only has 14%, and then these two, yeah, this guy's much less, right? But he's kind of works a lot different than this guy. But overall, I would say this guy is the harder fight. I do think he's the hardest fight in the game. Just thinking about everything that he's doing, the damage that he could do as well. It's just, yeah, I think for sure this guy is just quite strong. So Omega Shenron here. Now, we have damage calculator here. I just wanted to show this here. Wait, okay, it's right here, the damage calculator. These are the stats, right? So we're gonna look at type neutral and then type disadvantage. Type advantage, I honestly don't really care for. If you're like a relatively good unit, you like if you have like, let's say 400k defense to 500k defense, like a relatively good type advantage unit, you will basically take double digits from Sin unless he supers first. Then at that point I could see him doing damage, but I'm not too sure how to calculate this, and I'd rather not give false information, so we're just gonna go like this. We're just gonna say, okay, look at the type neutral numbers, and then it's gonna be a pretty good amount lower than that, I feel like. So type neutral versus Sin Shenron, depending on if you're super or extreme class. So again, let's say just fully type neutral extreme class. You need 400k defense to tank his normals before he super attacks, and then 600k defense to take his normals after he supers. Again, the reason why is because he has the 50% attack raise, so you basically add half of this to itself. So 400,000, you add 200,000 to that, and then that's his post 50% raise super. So no, that's not only just applied to this though, by the way. That's also applied to these two. So that first AoE could hit for 600k, which is really disgusting on a floating unit having to take a 600k normal. And then even this, well, you add, how much would this be? That would be 510k if I'm doing the math correctly, because isn't that 100? No, that'd be a little more, like 540k. Yeah, 540k is what you take, because you would have to add 100. So it's like 180 to that or something like that. 100. Wait, brain doesn't work. 550k. 550k. Okay. You know, whatever. So, doing math like just like that and not having it prepared ahead of time hurts my brain. What can I say? But obviously, if you're super class, you have to keep in mind that there's the extra damage that you would take. I closed the thing, didn't I? But you do take 15% extra damage, essentially, from what these normal attacks would be, based on the pure stats. So, super class unit would need 460k defense in order to take the normals, and then he would need 690k after to take the normals. So, it is a pretty big difference there. Like, compared to extreme class, I think for sure. Then if your type disadvantage, which is physical right here, super class just needs 600k normals, 600k defense to take the normals, and then 900k defense to take the normals, which is that's a lot of damage, right? I believe it's a extra 50% raise essentially, so you can kind of see where that's coming from. Very, very nasty damage. Like, imagine like you're super physical, and then Omega supers, and then his AoE comes and hits you for 900k. Like, oh, that's pretty nasty, right? Then if you're extreme physical, 500k defense, and then 750k defense, right? Now, again, this is just pure raw stats. There are other things to consider, such as damage reduction and guard, right? Those are defensive abilities that could reduce the damage you would take from this. But we're just considering the pure stats, type neutral, without any guard or damage reduction. Let's say if you're running like the Super Saiyan 3 Goku and Vegeta, like this is the defense you would need for them to in order to take the normals like that, right? Now we go to Int Omega. He actually does require a little less defense, kind of. So like, kind of, because if it depends on where Sin supers you. If this S tier Omega supers you like straight away, then you're gonna just have to have stronger defenses usually. But if he doesn't, then this guy would hit harder because he has just a flat 500k compared to this guy's 400k, and then potential some attacks hit for 600k, right? It just really depends where the super attack is. But here are the numbers. For, again, extreme class, that's type neutral, 500k defense. Super class, that's type neutral, you need 575k defense. If you're type disadvantage extreme class, you need 625k defense. And then if you're, type disadvantage super class, you need 750k. So like Orange Piccolo would need like 750k, disregarding like his damage reduction that he can get, stuff like that, right? 23rd World Tournament Goku, Gohan and Goten, right? And keep in mind, this applies to his AoEs. So if you're like Gohan and Goten, who gets a lot of defense on super, they're gonna get creamed pretty hard because they're not gonna have 750k defense that are turned like that, right? So like this guy really shuts down some of these tech units that are in the game right now. But just units in general. It's because so many units nowadays, because of how multiplicative passive works, so many characters need to get defense like during the attacking phase in order for them to have good defense stats. But unless they would give a unit like 400% defense or something like that, like just flat sort of turn, right? That'd be kind of different. But then it's like this, right? The AoEs makes that really tough in order to tank those normals. So that's pretty much it there. Again, we know how hard a super attack hits. 1.4 mil with 40% debuff. That's pretty hard, right? If it's especially not a unit that has the like, well, how do I explain it? Especially if it's a unit that doesn't stack defense, that will be very devastating for you. So that is how Omega Shenron actually works right here. Again, if you compare him to like stats with Metacooler Core, right, the final phase, like this guy again, 500k right here. This guy 430k. Once he raises his attack stats technically higher, but he doesn't attack as much. There's no AoEs. He has a much higher cooldown, like 8 attacks per turn. 8 cooldown means that he could like super you at the final attack of the turn, and then he likely won't super attack you next turn. Or even like if it was like the final 2 or 3 attacks, right? Likely you won't get super attacked again until the turn after that, right? So that's the thing about that. We have Somax. Somax definitely just hits harder, right? We see Somax to this 1.85 million at super attack, 2 per turn and a 6 cooldown. Like this guy is still very competitive in terms of pure stat wise being the hardest fight. But the thing with this guy is that there is special, like you could run full int very safely like against this guy, right? Against this guy it's pretty unsafe to run full physical because this phase right here really shuts you down there, right? So like I'm saying, it's like it's punishing you for running type advantage units, right? Which is an interesting thing because we've seen that before. But I feel like this is like the first event that's like sends red zone that like is a full type coverage. So no matter what, you're punished for running type advantage, whether it's against even this S tier or Omega, right, with the first phase. Now this guy has a higher chance super, right? And another thing, even though this guy does lock, he does have the superhero boost, while this unit doesn't have the boost like that. In fact, this event restricts some units, like all the nuke leaders, like AGL, TUR, Golden Freezer, you can't use in here, for example, right? So that's the thing there. And that's everything I want to talk about. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope maybe if you see the other video, you'll see this one. And that's it for me. I'll catch you next time. Peace out.